gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Live life. Live fully.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We love having you here, and it's our mission to bring you all the latest and greatest tips, skills, and know-how to make you the best that you can be. We know that you have it in you, and we're going to show you how. Now, let's get started.
It's your host, Omobola Stephen, on the show today, and welcome to Life Well Lived. If you want to catch up with any of my missed episodes, go online and search for Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen on any podcast distribution platforms or any cross-promotion platforms you bump into online, and you have an amazing time listening to the show. I have Karen Gershowitz, who is a travel addict, travel writer, photographer, and author on the show today. Welcome with me, Karen. How are you doing today, Karen?
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here and coming from cold New York.
Lovely to have you on the show once again, Karen. I'm looking forward to your expertise, especially on the topic of discussion, talking about travel, right? Now, let me begin with this payoff I found on your site. You said travel is Karen's addiction and she doesn't want treatment. Now, how does this all happen?
Well, when I was very young, and I do mean very young, I was 16, I decided I was leaving New York. New York was kind of a mess then. It was in the late 60s and not a good place to be. And I moved to Europe. Basically, I went to go to school, but really it was so that I could reinvent myself. And I ended up living mostly in London for about 3 years on my own, made a ton of friends over there, and became completely addicted to traveling. It was a time when you could really, if you were a student, travel for next to nothing. And I stayed at youth hostels, and I hitchhiked a lot, and whatever way I could get around, I did. And after that, I was on a roll. I came back to the States, went to college, and to study ceramics, I might add, because that's one of the things I'm going to add in here is my career has changed half a dozen times since then. But I went to college for ceramics, and my instructor was really in love with Japanese ceramics. And he went one summer and traveled all over Japan. And he came back with photos and stories and pots, and I was smitten. I decided I had to go to Japan. I had no money. And that's one of the fallacies that everyone has, is you can't travel if you don't have money. Trust me, where there's a will, there's a way. And I convinced the college to pay part of it for me. And I spent 6 weeks in Japan. And after that, speaking no Japanese and going to the wild outposts of Japan, I realized I could go anywhere. Only speaking English. And it was like freedom, because I had no more fear of being in a country where I didn't speak the language.
Great.
And that was the start of it. And then it just snowballed, as they say.
Great. The rest become history, right?
Yes. The rest is history. And since then, by the way, I've been to 90 countries.
Oh, great.
So a lot of traveling, and a lot of them many, many times.
Sure. Now, definitely, as a travel junkie, I know that. I know you've explored over 90 countries. Now, I need you to tell me some common travel problems that will affect a person at some point in their travel expedition.
Well, when I was younger, now not so much, as a single woman traveling alone, and I did travel a lot by myself, it was often uncomfortable. And I had to learn how to be comfortable eating on my own, and how to avoid places that were likely to be unsafe for me. That didn't mean not going to countries because I thought, it's, that's going to be a problem. But it meant just being a little smarter about things. And in fact, the only trip I've ever had where I was really scared was a business trip, which is the other piece of this that I found after ceramics. I switched careers to become a marketing consultant so that my clients would pay for my travel. And interestingly enough, I was in Brazil on business, and that was the only time I've ever been scared. Nothing happened, but everybody kept telling me these stories of people getting abducted and people getting things stolen from them. And as I say, nothing happened, but it was scary. The other thing is you have to get pretty savvy about who you connect with. And I've connected with tons of people all around the world. And you have to be a pretty good judge of character quickly, because there are lots of people who want to take advantage, particularly of women. But for the most part, people are fabulous. They're helpful. They want to be helpful. They're curious. I've had experiences where, excuse me, I'm very curious, but they're equally curious about me. And especially coming from New York, which is a city that everyone around the globe knows. People are very, very curious about it. So I get lots of questions, and that kind of opens the door for me to ask lots of questions. And so, part of it is just being able to engage with people, because that's the fun part of traveling. I mean, I like seeing the museums and the buildings and the gardens and the parks, but I really love connecting with people and eating the local food and, going to concerts that are local. That's the stuff that's really interesting. So
Right.
that's the stuff that I make a distinction between a tourist and a traveler. And a tourist is somebody who goes to see the sights. They go to Paris and they go see the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe, and they go to see, just the things that you're supposed to see. I go sit in a cafe and people watch and try and talk with people. I take a bus or the metro and randomly get off somewhere and walk around where people live just to see what it's like. And then I'll sit at a cafe, and almost always somebody will come over and talk with me. And that's the great thing about traveling alone, is when you are alone, people are likely to come over. If you're with someone else, they won't. But if you're by yourself, then they sort of feel like it's okay. And I appreciate that. And I understand that, because I wouldn't go up to a couple. But if somebody were sitting there alone, and I've done it, happy to have a conversation. So, it's one of those things. A lot of people are afraid of traveling alone, but the people who've done it and who do it regularly love it. And it surprises people who don't. It's like, why would you want to do that? Well, it's got a lot of benefits. So how about you? Are you a traveler?
Good to know that. Oh, sure. I love traveling also. Now, that's why I invited you on the show, right? I need you to tell me the difference between travel and expedition. Do you have any personal experiences between the two?
Well, if you're thinking of expedition the way I think of an expedition, those are places where you can't go by yourself. It's almost impossible. For example, I've been in Tanzania, and I've been in Kenya, and I've been in where I've gone on safaris, and you can't do that by yourself. It's just not possible. So that's fun, because if you go with a group that does some kind of off the beaten path places, it's really fun to do. Years ago, back in the early 80s, I was in Tanzania, and we were tenting with a group, only 6 of us. And we went out to a Maasai village and had a fabulous time interacting with people. It was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had. I draw well. I was an art student. And so I was sitting there with a sketch pad, and I drew a picture of my house. And one young girl who was, very, very brave, came over and drew me a picture of her house. And then I drew a picture of my family And she drew me a picture of her family. And so even though we couldn't speak, we were really communicating. And we had such a good time. And I would never have gotten there had I not been with this group. Similarly, I've taken, like hikes in New Zealand where I would not have gone alone because it would have been too dangerous. But with a group, if it's a small group and somebody knows what they're doing and can take you to places that you wouldn't go by yourself, it's great. It's really, really great. So if that's what you're referring to, yeah, that's the difference, is that to me, an expedition takes you to places where you couldn't go on your own, whereas as a traveler, you're going to places that you don't require that. And the first time I went to China, I went on with a group, not speaking Chinese or reading Chinese, and understanding and having read a lot about it. I wanted to get out of the major cities. I could have gone to Shanghai and I could have gone to Beijing on my own, but I really couldn't have gone into the countryside by myself. So I found a trip that went into less developed areas because I really wanted to see both the countryside as well as the cities.
Right. Karen, I know that you are a travel photographer. Right. Can you tell me about travel photography? Any personal memories you like to share and any risks that you faced in this regard?
Well, I take photographs constantly. I probably, how many tens of thousands of photos I have. And I am always very careful. If I take pictures of photo and their faces, very obvious, I will always ask permission. I wouldn't want somebody taking my photo, so I'm not going to take a photo of someone else unless they agree to it. Because I think it's just rude, quite honestly. And for a lot of cultures, it's really invasive and it feels like you're stealing something from them. So not something I would do. If it's a group, it's one thing, but to take an individual, absolutely would never do that. But taking photographs is one of the joys for two reasons. One, you can share the experience with other people. I tell lots of stories, but the photos add another dimension to it. And the other piece of it is you go back and it sparks memories for you of all kinds of things. The other thing was my mother, when I was very, very young, and when I say young, I mean like 6 or 7, started me doing travel journals. And we went to Florida. That was a big, big adventure. Sure. And to go visit my grandmother. And she had me keep a journal. And the journals were drawings and, with a few words, because I couldn't really write very much at that point. I still have them. But she got me started doing it. And I have kept a travel journal for every trip I've ever taken. And they're all on my computer. So now, when I wrote my first book, Travel Mania, I went back to it and I used it as source material. That was, that and the photographs together just brought back so many memories that I could use to write from. And I'm finding now I'm writing a second book, also a travel book, called People, Places, and Food. And that one, I went back into journals that I hadn't read in years and went, oh my, I remember that. What a great story. And so that's been the impetus for the second book that I'm writing, which I'm very excited to say my publisher has already accepted. So, yeah, so second book will be coming out in the fall of 2023.
Oh, great. I wish you best of luck in that. Quickly, can you tell me a bit about your book, Travel Mania?
Yeah, it's a compilation